I don't really know what to say or where to start. Where to start is perhaps the closer approximation of things. So maybe just start with a name and go from there. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I am not going to talk about anything in particular. I have been wearing this jumper in a few videos now. This is what happens. I reached a point of laziness and just decide, well, I'll throw the same thing on. It saves having to make a decision. So this morning I come to you feeling particularly fat. It's the only way I can say it, really. Some days you're awake and feeling like this, and there's no way that this is going to go away. That's what I've talked about before, how despite the fact that I have lost 7 stone, there is still, well, there's still more that I want to lose, and there are still mornings where you wake up, look at yourself, and you think, do you know what? Today is not that day. Today is the day where you're not going to notice your successes, facially wise. I think also last week I know that I was experiencing some inflammation from all of the arthritic things, which do seem to have gone off slightly, but I am noticing pains creeping in where they didn't before. Sitting down for any length of time, it's a difficulty to dispose of the stiffness in my hips when moving, but I'm hoping if I take up some of the exercises that my physio gave me years ago, they will help to set this right. And also, I know that this week, despite being good, I hate the idea between good and bad, so despite following behaviours that would lead one to maintain a certain weight or indeed lose a bit more, on Thursday it was the book launch for a friend of mine. I know I've talked about Joy here before. Joy was the founder of Our Creative Writing Group, and her husband John has released his first novel, which is a fictionalized account of what happened to his family during the Second World War, as a German family who were not on the side of the Nazis. So he launched this on Thursday, and afterwards a few of us went out for drinks, and I don't ordinarily do this on a work night. Well, firstly, we went into this place, which is, I don't know what an IPA is, but I've never enjoyed them. That's all I can say about it. And we went into this place, and I like my alcohol to taste like alcohol. It's the whole reason I drink bitter. I need the experience. When I choose to have alcohol, that's the experience I want. I want it to not taste like pop. And whatever this IPA was, felt like fizzy tropical fruit punch, and I was not there for it. So John had the same, and also it's expensive. Like, the only one that looked as though it would be a proper pint was £6.50 for a pint. No. So some people left, and who I knew, some people left, and John said, did we want to go down to this other pub, whose name I can't remember, but I know that it was the Castle. I just can't remember whether there's anything after that, like an inn or a pub or something like that. And we went there many moons ago after another poetry event, and there was a bigger crowd of us then, and the toilets were still outside, and then the next thing we knew, the place had been closed down because it was a bit dilapidated. Well, it's been reopened, it's been redone, and we went in there and we had 2 pints that were served in like glass tankards that really took me back to my youth. And I finally got to a proper beer, but that's 4 beers in one night. And despite then choosing to walk home to try and dispel some of the calories, that's all that comes into your head then. So that's where my mind currently is. 5 minutes, at least we've discussed that. Anyway, John's book, Unbidden, I beta read last year, and like I say, he launched it on Thursday, and copies are available on certain internet sites, which unfortunately, if you are overseas, you will probably be better to acquire them from there, simply because of the cost of postage and the way things are at the moment. But yeah, I'll leave a link somewhere. In other book-related news, sorry, just check my handbrakes on. My car seemed to be shaking. It might have just been because I moved. In other book-related news, the Woman's Prize for Fiction was announced on Tuesday morning. Me and my friend Charlie, formerly of Charlie Brooke, but you can follow her on Instagram at Piccola's Mum, she and I decided that we would try and read as many of the Women's Prize for Fiction as we could, and hopefully maybe buddy read some, or at the very least discuss some of them. So we'll get into what was on the long list in a second, but we'd both been predicting what would be on there. I'd been hoping for certain books to be on there simply because I already owned them, and it would have been a way for me to get through them and not have to acquire anything new. So Charlie said to me she'd been refreshing the page on the Woman's Prize long list, despite the fact we knew it wasn't getting announced until Tuesday morning. She had been refreshing the page just in case someone slipped up. Well, 2 websites slipped up on Monday night. I don't know whether anybody else noticed them, but I did. I think it was Home and Style no, it was Good Housekeeping. Accidentally announced it at 9:45 on Monday night, as did Yahoo Style. Good Housekeeping took theirs down, Yahoo Style didn't. And so I went and I ordered every single book that I could from the long list from my library catalogue, and I felt sneaky doing that. And then I waited until the morning to find out whether this was the actual official long list, which it was. I used an Audible credit, I used BorrowBox, and so I've only had to acquire 2 new books, which I probably would have acquired anyway because I like the sound of them. And they are The Bread the Devil Need and Salt Lick. If I could remember the authors, then I would. Salt Lick, I remember hearing about last year and considering giving some money to this whole, because it was, what do they call it? It's not public funded. I mean, that's the sort of thing. Crowd funded, that's it. This was the one that was crowd funded. But you know me, I'm a skinflint. I'm a horrible person. So I was glad to see that on there. I have to say, wasn't too happy to see Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason on there, but that's because I like that book. I did a vlog about that book, and then the ending ruined everything for me with that book. The ending soured everything that book had been striving towards. And then I finished reading The Sentence by Louise Erdrich on Sunday, and considering I wanted everybody to go out and read that book, that is the quintessential book lovers book. We follow the character of Tuki, who in the beginning is arrested and sentenced for taking a dead body over state lines, but what she hasn't realised is that there were drugs underneath this man's armpits, and that the 2 people who were supposedly against each other have conspired together, and she ends up sent down. Eventually she's released, she gets a job at a bookstore, and on All Souls Day in 2019, one of the ghosts of their busybody customers has started haunting the shelves. And this book deals with a lot. It goes through the entirety of 2019, 2020, and so we get to relive events that have happened very closely to us. And I found at first, when there's certain mention of what we've just all been through in the last 2 years, when that was first mentioned, I didn't know where this story was going. And then I felt like the author had utilised it well, because not only does it add a level of tension that ultimately, if written differently, could have cheapened the narrative, but it adds more tension because Tookie has been trying to avoid this ghost, and now, due to certain things, she and this ghost are getting stuck together a lot more. And it's also being used for the protagonist to analyse their own life. I do actually think there is someone right behind me in the other car park. Well, that's none of my business. So I was really thrilled to see the sentence on there. It's 2 for 2 of a Louise Erdrich's that I've liked now. And then I already had The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak out of the library, and I renewed this on Sunday because it would have, I would think that if the long list had been announced prior to the long list was announced prior to the book being able to be renewed, and I thought that someone would definitely try and reserve it then, so I just got myself a few more weeks, and I'm going to try and read that within the next couple of days. I'm also listening to the final revival of Opal and Nev on Audible, and I forgot my headphones today, so wasn't able to. That's one I'm like this about, because the style of writing in some ways reminds me of classic literature, you know, something like The Moonstone, even the Agatha Christie I liked last year, where all of these people are giving their own interviews and stories to create the bigger narrative of what went on. And unfortunately, so far, what I've heard, I am concerned that it's being used to cover up some very basic writing that might not have had the necessary skill to actually create a novel. I don't know, but it's felt very basic and I haven't enjoyed it. But we'll see. I also currently have a, do we call them a newspaper holder? It's, my grandmother had one and she kept all of her magazines in it. And I've thought about getting one for years because I have a ton of magazines at home that I still haven't read. And then I was speaking to my manager, she was throwing it out and she said to take it. But I just feel like I've got something that my magazines are going to sit in and I'm still not going to read them. But we'll see. We will see. Also, I had a row with my mother yesterday over money because that's what we always row about. And because I ended up looking up narrowboats. And I discovered that there had actually been a narrowboat for sale in the town I work in last year. And I looked into it last year. Basically, I found out that a lot of people in England, young people, have been basically, you don't call it mortgaging a narrowboat, I can't remember what you call it, but basically getting a loan, paying it off in instalments, and then when they've paid off the entire boat, they sell the boat and they use that as like a lump sum as a down payment on a house. But it's just one of those where I feel like my own space would be necessary. I missed out on a house in this town a few weeks ago, and everyone says you don't want to be with housing associations anyway. But it was with housing association. It was rather affordable rent. It was 5 minutes up the road from where I work, and I missed out because I didn't know that you can bid on properties, but you have to put in an application, and that can take 5 days for the application to be put through before you're able to bid on properties. And there's also something where if they find you somewhere that fits with what you want, then they will give you 2 chances and then say, well, no, you've had the chance, you'll have to start this process all over again. And depending on how long you've been waiting is how long you'll end up on this waiting, you know, it's difficult. I don't even think I could live on a narrowboat. I've talked about this before. I think that I think it'd be too small. I think that considering I already get my arthritis gets bad in cold, to be on there in winter wouldn't be nice. and the storms we've had recently, I don't think it'd be a nice experience to be in them. So unfortunately, whilst it would be something that I could look into and maybe afford if I did try this whole going to a brokerage and getting money and that sort of thing, I don't think that I could do it. Then, moving on, I didn't announce it. They announced the International Booker Prize on Wednesday or Thursday. They did it one day anyway. And I started reading the Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, and I believe this was translated by Jennifer Wright. I'm not sure. Anyway, got this because of KD Books video about it, and started reading it, then was watching the long list announcement, and did the whole thing again. This time I've actually bought some books because, well, I can't say why. I just realised I can't say why I bought a book, but I bought some books that came from a certain publisher because I'd read something else from this publisher, and so I got these books. And again, audiobooks, borrow box, library, orders are in, and then some of them I left simply because I decided this time around I would wait and see if they made it to the shortlist, and if they made it to the shortlist I'd try and read them, because there's a much smaller window between the long list and shortlist of the International Booker than there is with the Women's Prize. And I don't actually know why I'm doing this to myself. Years ago, I recognised that when it came to these prize-winning books, I was ended up disappointed. I've been disappointed by the normal Booker for years before I chose no longer to follow it. And yeah, there was just something over the last few weeks or so where I've been like, do you know what? I'm going to try and read as many as I can and make my decision on it, despite the fact that I still keep going on about the Anthony Trollops I've got there and all the other books that I have to read. And even Charlie saying, well, everyone's wondering why I'm doing this to myself. And the answer is that I don't know. I am vlogging my experience of reading the Books of Jacob, but the one constant that has been throughout it is that I think that if you've read any sort of fantasy fiction, then you'll be able to get through this. In terms of storytelling, sometimes I'm reminded of the Karamazov brothers that I read last year by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I think that if you've read any sort of big tome that takes a bit of, not intensive reading, but it takes up more time, you'll be able to get through this. It might take you longer than it would take with a standard book, but don't be intimidated by it. Just take your time. It's separated into 7 books anyway, so technically you're not even reading 892 pages of one book. They might make up a full narrative, but there's 7 books in there. Just read it a book at a time. At least that's how I took it. It's also very much like one of these non-linear jumping around the town, could be confusing if you let it sort of dramas, but if you just settle down for the ride and trust the writer, then you're okay. And that's all I gotta say about that one. Tuesday I was also writing some poetry because I want to do a poetry collection as well. I might try and edit the image later. A volunteer turned up because she wanted to get a lamp and return something, and informed me that she can do the cover that I need this week. So yeah, poetry. So most of the poems that I've written for this collection, they're all around the theme of farming. If you didn't know, my father is a sheep farmer and it has been part of the family business my entire life. It's not something I want to do, but the collection is exploring that and the and being the son of a farmer and these different ideas and the way I don't properly understand that world. Also, just a bit of fun, really. Poetry is something that I write when I need a break from the longer form stuff. But I do want to create this collection. And I noticed there's a lot of dark poetry in there, some with more bleak imagery, and so I decided I had to write some more humorous ones along lines of the Mary had a motorbike that I shared last week, which I also did another version of where I said Mary had a little lamb with peas and roast potatoes. He didn't know when he was born to love her would be fatal. And then I wrote another poem. And I, again, to mention Charlie of Charlie Brooke, I had to share it with her. And because I shared this poem that I thought was really humorous with my mother, who sat there and said it was really dark, and she didn't laugh, and I wrote that for humour. I mean, my dad laughed, and my nan laughed. Well, my nan laughed when my mother shared it with her, but my mother didn't share it properly, so my nan didn't even get told what was supposed to be funny about it. Anyway, I've got a weird sense of humour, apparently. A bit dark, a bit twisted. And I had this off my manager a few weeks ago, who said to me that sometimes what you think is funny, other people don't think is funny. Which, you know, I understand. Like, there was stuff within Hilary Mantel that I found hilarious, and I've previously laughed at writers' works at the writers' group and had to inform them that it was grotesque and I loved it, and they didn't understand that. So, you know, but it seems that no matter what I do, it seems that no matter what I try, my humour is dark. So that was that. I also spent ages reworking a poem called The Butcher's Boy, which when I first read it at the writers group, I was told that it could have this really nice bouncy rhythm. So I've been trying to replicate this bouncy rhythm throughout. And that was a lot of work indeed. And I still haven't achieved it. And now I'm considering making changes to the start of every single line, so that the first line is the butcher's boy rides his bicycle through Bollington, and that'll be the first line of each stanza to help that rhythm along, because I vary it currently. So it's like, the butcher's boy rides his bicycle through Bollington. The butcher's boy doesn't want to ride his bicycle through Bollington. There's always a variation on it, and I'm just not sure whether that works in terms of keeping this rhythm. Anyway, my manager's off. One of my volunteers has resigned, so that's why this week we're really working hard to cover stuff. So the other shop assistant should be coming in to help me today. Oh, just seeing that I missed a volunteer's birthday on Thursday. That's always fun. Well, we know that I haven't given much time to my own birthday since my own family seem to decide that they don't want to celebrate it. So ever since I made the decision not to celebrate my own, I've been really awful about celebrating other people's, because I just forget that they're things now. Although I do have a campaign to get my name removed from this calendar. They put my birthday on here every year. Last year I got away with it. In fact, there have been some years where I've got away with it. Last year it fell on a Saturday, and my manager was away, and so the volunteer I say about who's resigned, she turned up before the shop had opened because she was somewhere else. So only the two people who knew that it had been my birthday were away, and so I got through the day as normal. The year before that, it will have been a Friday, but because of everything else going on in the world, I got to avoid it. It will have been a Thursday. When did we have a leap year? Maybe it was a Thursday the year before. Or was it Friday than a Wednesday. Either way, I'm finding it much easier to avoid nowadays. People are getting happier with the idea that I don't like to celebrate, but as I say, well, that was just spurred on by looking at that up there, wasn't it? Well, I feel like this week's going to be more difficult in terms of reading and writing and wanting to do anything else at home. I'm feeling sorry for Sally because naturally this means walks are going to be limited or restricted to just the towpath. If I do get time to go up to the forest, then hopefully I'll be able to do a really long walk to almost apologise to the little dog. And of course we will be walking somewhere tomorrow, but I tend to avoid the forest or anywhere that people might be on a on a Sunday, because they tend to annoy me by walking too slow or getting in my way or stopping for a flaming selfie. At least when I stop to record footage for you, I usually do it when there's nobody else around, so I'm not in the way of anybody. That was another thing I mentioned on Instagram yesterday, how this week I keep getting comments about why I have the dog on a lead. And apart from the fact that I think it's, from my own perspective, more responsible to have her on a lead, she's also lazy. And we'll get so far on a walk and she'll decide now I've had enough and start trying to turn back. So I've got to keep her on a lead so she actually gets the exercise that she needs, especially when my mother and my brother go a bit ham on giving her treats. I think that's everything. I think I've talked about myself long enough, and I don't really know what else to say. My nephew has COVID, so there's chances my younger brother might not be able to go and work with our older brother in Scotland, but we'll see how it goes, because whilst he was incredibly ill Wednesday night into Thursday morning, on Friday he was feeling a bit better, so hopefully it was just a really bad few first days, and that only being 8 years old, he'll have the fortitude of being a bit feral to get better soon, touch wood. Older brother's in hospital again, sister's off to Birmingham for Crofts. And I've never heard back from that older relative, you know, the long-lost sister of me, dead grandmother. Yeah, we never heard anything else from her. We never found out whether the older sister, who was, well, we don't talk about Doris. We don't talk about Doris, actually. I completely forgot I had an Auntie Doris when I wrote the flaming books. And apparently libraries just aren't getting back in touch with me nowadays. So if I ever get another event, then that will be a fine thing indeed. But I need coffee. I've got a book that I want to do some reading of, and I need to get this shop ready for some volunteers. So it's what you're reading, or what you're writing, what you're watching, what you're listening to. The only thing I've watched is Drag Race recently, and the less said about the finale of Drag Race UK vs the World, the better, because that led to what might just be one of the worst prizes ever awarded on television. And I'm including that show where you could win a cuddly toy. Do you remember when people used to get thrilled over a toaster, and now it's like, if I don't get a grand, I'm bust? To be fair, all these prizes are worthless anyway. £100,000 in the UK will get you nothing nowadays. You want to buy a house? Haha, chance to be a fine thing. You're going to need to win the prize twice. Come back next year. Who wants to be a millionaire? I'd like it, because it's the only way I'm going to be able to get on the property ladder in England nowadays. This is why I talk about a narrowboat. But even they have gone expensive. I could spend every bit of money I've saved and I could buy a narrowboat. It's just not narrow. It's not canal worthy. It's got nothing inside it. It needs every single thing redoing to it. And I know nothing about DIY. So, Abyssinia. I hope that you got something out of this video, because until next time, that is